Hi, I'm Daniel from Black Magic Marching Band, and you're watching Garage Bands. I would say that I write and perform music because I'm compelled to do it. It's one of those things that if I was getting, if I was only doing it for sort of, financial gain, would have given it up long ago. If I was merely doing it because it was a thing that everyone else my age was doing or my cohort was involved in, I would have given that up once they all started having kids and, mowing lawns and having better things to do. But yeah, it's ever since I was, probably about 4 or 5 years old, it's like I felt compelled to create stuff. And it was really, kind of what I spent my, childhood and adolescence doing was kind of figuring out what was the medium, what was the approach that worked for me. And wound up in music because it allowed me to sort of do a thing I love, which is, I'm very interested in pop music and rock music. And so it allowed me to stay interested in that. And then sort of the words piece was something that came naturally as a writer, as someone who understood words. But I really thought I was going to become like sort of a short story writer, a novel, an author of novels, and didn't really wind up having the passion or the drive to make that happen in terms of long-term prose. But sort of found out that I had a way with words when it came to songwriting, and so jumped in, and it's sort of a compulsion at this point. In terms of musical influences, because I had a rock dad, I got a big dose of all your typical, sort of classic rock folks. And then kind of having that basis and I think he was big into Bruce Springsteen. I remember he had, the Derek and the Dominoes record, when I was a kid. But from that point, I sort of, kind of went off on my own, started listening to a ton of your, golden moldies, like classic rock stuff. And it was, I was a teenager in the 90s. So a lot of the alternative rock and grunge stuff was sort of, the first new stuff I cut my teeth on. But then I got really interested in glam rock, like 70s glitter rock when I was in high school, and sort of became a big fan of, like Bowie and T-Rex at that point. And in terms of things that have stuck with me, I would say, Dylan's a big one, Bowie's a big one. And then recently, I have a problem with records. I still buy a ton of records. I still listen to a ton of music. And so I've always got my, I've always licked my finger and put it up in the wind to find out what else is going on. And, most recently, I've really been into like the work that, Phoebe Bridgers has been doing, like both as a solo artist and as a collaborator. I saw her with Conor Oberst in Better Oblivion, and they were, really, really interesting. So, I'm always sort of learning and stealing little bits because I like to steal stuff. In terms of my music, I would, and having been an amateur rock critic at one point, I love to think about how I would describe my music. But if I'm really being honest, a lot of it is, fairly arty, fairly meta. It's a lot of songs about songs. It's about a lot of recontextualizing my interest in other people's music via doing music about it, which can get a little arch, can get a little weird and a little over-intellectualized. And you do wind up going down this rabbit hole of, what's a way to understand Bruce Springsteen through a feminist lens. And while, it's really interesting to talk about it, you can't always, dance to it. So I've actually, with Black Magic Marching Band, it's my approach to kind of get away from some of the sort of more arch meta ways of recontextualizing classic rock and just kind of do stuff that's a little more romantic, a little more lyrical, a little more based in just imagery, sound, ideas, sort of getting away from sort of more linear thought processes and just sort of like, oh, hey, these images are interesting, these sounds work well with these words, and let's kind of throw it out there and see what goes on. I would say that classic rock definitely forms sort of a background of what I do. It's sort of, it's where my brain goes in terms of riffs, words, this is how you do, verse, bridge, chorus, out. Is definitely a thing I approach, but I don't necessarily have the chops or really the ambition to sort of redo sort of, Zeppelin 4 in my basement or something. It's more sort of like that's the building blocks that I'm working with, but then I'm doing my own approach to it. My songwriting process really, breaks down two different ways. One of the more common ways is, I'll start writing lyrics first. I'll get, a title that I want to work out and turn into a song, or, I'll catch something worded on a sign somewhere that I find interesting, or just sort of something someone says that sticks in my head, and then I'll start framing a song around that. And I'm a big fan of Bob Dylan, so I tend to want to write sort of tight rhyme schemes, lots of couplets. And so I'll usually kind of build verses out from there, and then once you have the verses, then use the chorus to sort of comment on the verses, and that's kind of how I'll put things together, words first. Or my song Green Dragon Green actually started out just purely as a melody. It was something that I had in my head while I was driving to work, and I probably still have it on my phone, an audio note of me sort of humming the first 4 or 5 bars of the melody into the phone, and it just stuck with me. And then as I was thinking like, oh, I should work on some of my creative backlog stuff, I kept going back to it, and then I figured out what the chords were behind it, sort of tweak the melody a bit, put it in context with other parts, and so I had this fully realized song without lyrics. And then I just sort of started thinking about like what the melody itself reminded me of. I started listening to other songs for sort of like reference recordings, thinking about how I might arrange the song in a full band setting. And then I took a trip to visit my friend Matt in Charleston, Illinois, and went out for a walk at night by myself. I think he wound up having to work or something. And it was like kind of a weird, spooky winter night where it was warmer than was expected, and so there was a lot of wind and like really ominous clouds. And it was just sort of like the feeling of being out at night, just wandering around, really sort of just kind of stuck in my head. And some of the images from the verses really kind of come from that experience. And then actually wound up while I was in Charleston, later that weekend, kind of writing those first verses down in a little notebook, and then kind of put that song together. So in terms of meaning, it's not, I wish I could say that it was a narrative song or it was a take on a certain, style or trope of, ballad or murder ballad or something, but it's not. It just sort of crept up from this melody and just sort of organized itself.
Watch a world sliding by on a movie screen, flying high, swinging wide, green dragon green. In this midnight mirror hour, on the crooked side of town, see the clockwork kings of everything wind up the hill and around the block, you slip away, past perfect twilight mile, forever yesterday. It's a spell of welcome wonder and a wait along the way, and you say the words so long unheard today. this nation full of ruin, this nation soaked with woe, this kingdom torn asunder. Just why we cannot know. See the world sliding by on a movie screen, flying high, swinging wide, green dragon green. In this midnight mirror hour, on the crooked side of time, see the clockwork kings of everything wind down.
You know, like every good rock nerd, you know, I love Big Star, I love the Velvet Underground, and so it's like I'm using that as sort of a way to sort of couch ideas, but yeah, I'm not really that interested in myself, you know, strapping on a Les Paul, putting a Marshall stack behind me, and just sort of, you know, shredding tasty licks.